What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and I'm going to attempt a bit of a more complex topic, and that is what is to be done with the disposable game developer in the wake of even more layoffs now at GOG.com, and as well as Guild Wars following EA shutting down a studio in Australia. That is the third major wave of layoffs in just the past 7 days, and this all comes on the heels of 800 plus people being laid off at Activision, with more to come there, seeing more layoffs in their European offices, and I expect that to continue. So the commonly accepted or commonly spread reaction to this is that game developers should unionize. Well, I'm here to tell you that that would be the dumbest thing they could ever do. And I'm going to explain why that is and what a reasonable solution. It might not be the solution that they want to hear or that is the easiest to swallow, but I do think it's probably the best one. And I also want to remind you that after this video, in the pinned comment, make sure to check out the Exclusively Games YouTube channel. It has revealed its second series today, which is Regs Reviews, which will be weekly video game reviews. That goes on top of the weekly news show hosted by Sid Alpha. We have probably 3 or 4 more series to unveil, Friday being the next one. You want to be subscribed to this channel and check out Regs and Sid's videos on there. They worked hard on them, and I'm proud of those guys. So, facing some news, first about GOG quietly laying off at least a dozen staff. I'm told through my connections, because I know people that work there, that it was closer to 20. Some of them people, and that's about, I would say, 10% of the work staff. I think there's about 150 people that work there. Some of the people that were laid off both volunteered. Others had been there for as long as 10 years. And it's been at least a dozen, but my insiders say 20. That's kind of splitting hairs. But you didn't see this really talked about a lot. Amid a full month of mass layoffs across the video game industry, the digital store GOG quietly let go what it says is about a dozen staff last week. GOG, which is owned by Witcher 3 publisher CDProjektRed, did not say why the layoffs happened, but one laid off staffer tells Kotaku that the store has been in financial trouble. In an official statement to Kotaku, a representative for GOG confirmed the layoffs, but did not offer much more clarification. Letting people go is never easy. We have been rearranging certain teams since October, affecting and closing about a dozen of positions last week. At the same time, since the process we've started, we have welcomed nearly twice as many new team members and currently hold 20 open positions. That's bizarre. If they're really having financial trouble, why would they have laid off a dozen people to open 20? Well, the snarky, immediate, knee-jerk reply might be that they got rid of some higher-paid employees in order to replace them with cheaper employees. But from what I've told, GOG doesn't exactly pay that good. But there are some other issues going on, particularly with the Thronebreaker kind of flopping, to be honest with you. And they ditched the GOG exclusive idea and instead went to Steam within a month. I think the underperformance of Thronebreaker probably is maybe what's at this. We were told it was a financial decision. That person told me in an online message. GOG revenue couldn't keep up with its growth. The fact that we're dangerously close to being in the red has come up in the past few months. And the market's move towards higher developer revenue shares or will affect the bottom line as well. It's just an odd situation, like things got really desperate really fast. I know that February was a bad month, but January, on the other hand, was excellent. We were in the middle of general restructuring, moving some teams around, not unprecedented, but the layoffs that big have never happened before. The Epic Store, which launched in December, offers an 88% cut of revenues to developers, contrary to the 70% cut previously standard on stores like Steam and GOG. A move that will likely have a drastic impact on the entire PC landscape. This news comes during a rocky time video game industry, and then we want to talk about other failures. You see that, I think this is Schreier's piece, CDProjektRed's latest game, Gwent, has also been a financial disappointment, according to 2 people who worked for the studio. Last fall, The company pointed to GOG's small reach as one of the reasons the game's lack of success, quickly releasing Thronebreaker campaign on Steam after first declaring it would be a GOG exclusive. And that's what my insider tells me as well. And then when you look at another Guild Wars 2 developer, ArenaNet, plans for mass layoffs. From what I'm told, the numbers are very strong. Close to 100 people lost their job at ArenaNet. That's 25% of their staff. Some people think it went like this: 100 at Guild Wars 2, 300 at 2 unknown projects. After 300 at Guild Wars 2. It's interesting. It's insane that they had 400 employees at ArenaNet to begin with. Even when accounting for side projects, one thing that could be good is the restructuring management, more focus on Guild Wars 2. The thing with Guild Wars 2 is it absolutely has been losing market share year after year. That's a huge cut for them. You see, goodbye, beloved Guild Wars 2 community. I wish you all well in the future. This is their communications manager, who was also terminated. That's a big cut. I mean, you look to your left, to your right, and and then to the down one more spot, and one of you are going to be fired. You see people like Josh Foreman. 15 years is a heck of a run in video games industry. Happy trails to those who will remain. I'll be following your work. I know I'll be proud of what you accomplished. My fellow refugees, we've always been like family at ArenaNet, and the chances we are working together again. That's the thing is, it's easy to kind of meme on EA, for example, or ArenaNet. Remember when they had the Jessica Price thing? But at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of the people affected by these layoffs aren't involved in like online politics, or they're just people who, in most cases, probably really love video games. And, there's a lot of fat that is being trimmed. Guild Wars 2 developer ArenaNet lays off 143 employees at Bellevue HQ and cancels projects. ArenaNet, the video game maker behind Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, is laying off 143 employees at its Bellevue headquarters and canceling projects. The studio confirmed Monday following a report from Kotaku. A warn notice filed in the state of Washington on Monday later revealed that 143 employees would be laid off starting March 1st. ArenaNet, which employed more than 400 people according to LinkedIn, is owned by South Korean video game developer NCSoft, which is part of a larger organizational restructuring within NCSoft in the West. But the Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2 game service will not be affected, nor any upcoming game content canceled, the company said. Citing an internal email, Kotaku reports that NCSoft West CEO Song-Ye Yoon told employees, "Our live game business revenue model is declining as our franchise ages. Delays in development on PC and mobile have created further drains against our revenue projects, while our operating costs in the West have increased. Where we are is not sustainable, and this is not going to set us up for future success." Colleagues and fans took to Twitter to show support for affected employees using the hashtag #LoveForArenaNet. And, it's times like this that, undoubtedly there are people inside these companies that are great human beings that just really love the games industry. And this is, again, on top of EA. EA Australia studio Fire Monkeys suffers layoffs. Essentially, EA is laying off a large number of employees as Australian studio Fire Monkeys. It is not clear at this time how many employees have been laid off, but the 200 members of the studio that were there not long ago. But of the 200 members of the studio, it's believed that 40 to 50 employees have been laid off. It was previously reported that number could be as high as 80 to 100. And, of course, this is in the wake of EA Activision CEOs both making it into the top 100 in terms of overpaid CEOs. And I promise I'll bring this all together for you. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick, his pay is nearly $30 million. This is an overpayment of almost $13 million, according to As You Sow's estimates. He was the 45th most overpaid CEO on the list. EA's head Andrew Wilson's pay is $35.7 million. This is about $19.7 million too much, according to You So. Wilson rounded out the end of the list, appearing at number 98. The median pay for S&P is 142 to 1, which the report stated, while the median for companies on USO's list of the 100 most overpaid CEOs over twice as much, namely 300 to 1, meaning the CEO is making 300 times what an average employee is making. Now, I will say I've seen some of my contemporaries in the space cover this and refer to that pay gap as unreal or unfair or unearned. I disagree. It's not the CEO's fault for making a lot of money. The board of directors approved that sort of thing. I don't blame the person. It's like when you look at sports players who get huge contracts, I don't blame them for getting a huge contract, but I also then don't blame sports teams for cutting players who have underperformed their contract. You've earned that. You've negotiated it. It was given to you. You could call it a mistake all you want, but the discrepancy between what the average employee makes and the CEO, I think, is a shock and awe type number. What is the correct number? I mean, who's to say? I mean, are we gonna say everyone should be paid the same? Are we saying there's a predetermined amount? What if you're the type of CEO that really drives all the R&D? I mean, this list is obviously arbitrary, but overpaid is, I would say their term for not earning their keep. But the question then becomes, what's going on here? Clearly, we're seeing a market-wide retraction in the games industry. You're talking about several thousand people laid off in the last few months, and this huge drive to push unionization of the developers, which in my opinion would be one of the dumbest things ever. Now, if you're a developer and you're watching this, I'm going to speak bluntly. That's the only way I know how. Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, but there are developers that have very unique sets of skills that make them less replaceable. But I'm just speaking in generalizations from a business perspective. Developers unionizing would just lead to more outsourcing. Code development is one of the easiest things to outsource on the planet. So the idea that you have these, third world and developing nations full of developers willing to take jobs from the West, and that you're going to unionize, and you don't think, if you truly believe that CEOs of EA and Activision are overpaid and that they're going to make the quote greedy decision, what makes you think game developers unionizing won't just result in all of you being outsourced? I mean, that's what would happen. Absolutely. You can look at even in Europe where they have strong employment backing in France with the Blizzard layoffs. It didn't prevent those people from getting laid off. It just made it a little more difficult for Blizzard Activision to do it. If the game developers truly are interested in unionizing, I understand wanting to be protected, but the reality of the way that's going to work in the modern economy where, we're in a global economy and you can outsource almost anything, I don't think it's going to end well for you. What I think the best way for game developers to survive in the future, the best way to deal with these layoffs and to be less expendable is to seriously look at getting different sets of skills. I know that game development is a passion for most people. I don't think you have a lot of run-of-the-mill developers out there who just happen to develop video games. I'm sure there's a lot of passion and creativity there. However, the reality is the position is getting outsourced more and more. The salaries are getting crunched down. Layoffs are going to continue to happen. And what happens is when developers start a big project, right? They hire on a bunch of people, and then after the project launches, they're left with a ton of extra developers. That's just the way the development cycle works. That's part of the crunch. You can love it or hate it or be indifferent to it, but that's how it works. Every time a new studio is going to have a big project to launch, they're going to bring on a bunch of devs that at one point in a very predictable part of the future, they're not going to need as many. They're only going to need devs to maintain it, maybe do add-ons. And this is where you get a lot of the bloat. Companies try to keep people on and shuffle people around, but inevitably, you're going to be expendable until the next project. And companies can only continually grow, basically in perpetuity, for so long. It's impossible. You see this with EA and Activision, two gigantic companies. You see this with Ubisoft even. and you're going to get cut if you don't develop additional skills. Now, I'm not saying you can't be a developer, you shouldn't be a developer, but I think understanding what the market demands in terms of this space, I think, to be honest, I may be a little bit biased here, but understanding marketing, marketing is such a high spend area for studios, and regardless of how studios continue to develop, they're always going to have a huge marketing budget. You're not going to see a lot of marketing people get canned in terms of these layoffs, because if they still have games to market, they still need people in marketing. Customer service is another area, but that's a little more sketch because it's generally lower pay for longer hours. I think marketing, I think graphics, stuff like that, lore, in general, you just have to diversify and hope for the best. I think it used to be a highly coveted skill. Look, my dad is a machinist. It's nothing personal. Please don't be offended. I'm saying if you're a developer now, I think the best thing you can do is to be a developer, but also pick up additional skills, particularly in marketing, in my opinion, to make yourself worth money to a company. If you're good at marketing, you generate revenue. If you're a developer, you cost them money. It's just something to consider. My dad, in the 70s, being a machinist was a highly skilled trade. It was highly in demand. He was making $30, $40 an hour in the 80s, which is a fortune for a middle-class family. And now he's struggling to hang on to make it through to retirement, making about half of what he was. And it's just the way it is. It's no disrespect to him. It's just times change, demands change. And if you don't add additional skill sets to your resume, you're going to be a lot easier to get rid of. On top of that, if you do add additional skills, whether it's simple stuff like paid search marketing, email marketing, community management, picking up some of these projects on the side, when there are layoffs and there's suddenly 800 or 1,000 people in your general area that all do the same thing you do, what do you think happens when you have a few more skills to a company than another developer, right? They might say, we kind of need a developer, but we also need help in marketing. Maybe you can split your jobs. Or maybe it'll be more difficult to lay you off. This is simply a supply and demand conversation. The supply of developers far exceeds the demand. It's not their fault. It's not their fault that they get terminated either. It's the fault of really upper management making poor decisions, not looking longevity-wise, not looking long-term. I think there will always have to be some temporary positions at these companies, but planning out ahead and not over hiring and just expecting to be bailed out by layoffs, I think that's sloppy. I don't think that's good leadership, and I don't think it's the methodology of, quite frankly, a good human. But I think if you're a developer out there, the writing is on the wall that you need to pick up some additional skills, or you need to get out of the game development industry, because we know what they do. They bloat up, and then when the developers get mad, they trim down, or when the investors get mad. So it's disappointing that such a crucial position seems so disposable, but I think the reality is it's not going to change, and you would do yourself really solid by just picking up a few extra skills, maybe taking some classes, or offering to intern at other places. I don't know, but you've got to diversify your skill set if you're going to survive in this space in 2019 and beyond, because I don't see the game industry changing, and I absolutely don't see unionizing as a solution. That will only accelerate the demise. I hope you were informed and enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to click that thumbs up button, and we'll talk to you again real soon.